today's episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the 2012 movie Django Unchained. Let's dive right into Django Unchained. Do something, man. People are questioning you. Shut up. Shut up. Okay, yep, do that. Sure, guys. Stupid and dumb. Just an idiot. Get your shit together, son. Fuck it. I loved it. Welcome to the DubCast. Django Unchained was released on December 11th, 2012. The genre is a revisionist western. The runtime is 2 hours and 35 minutes. The budget is $100 million. The director is the one and only Quentin Tarantino, which of his movies I've seen Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All three pretty solid movies. Reservoir Dogs is one of my favorite movies. Pulp Fiction, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, also pretty good movies as well. So this movie stars Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kerry Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Walton Goggins, Dennis Christopher, James Remar, Michael Parks, and Don Johnson. So if you're new to the channel, what I do is give my overarching review of the movie, give it a score. We compare that score amongst the other movies I've reviewed so far, stacking up quite the resume. And then after that, I'll get into my thoughts and reactions throughout the film. So starting it off, we have my overarching review of Django Unchained. I thought, I've had this movie on my list for years. It's been near the top of something I've just wanted to see because I'll let my friends talk about it. I see some stuff about it in the media from here and then. I mean, my list has been running on for a couple of years now, but I really wanted to watch this movie. Finally got it done. I thought this movie mostly lived up to the hype I had for it leading into it. I thought Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz were amazing, and their chemistry on screen was very good. I'm not sure if they've worked together before, but it seemed like they had because they were just, so good together. You could tell there was camaraderie and chemistry on the screen there. I did also like Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, but I don't think I'm as high on his performance as I am on other movies he's been in. Just personally for me, I think he's a little bit better in movies like Shutter Island and Inception, The Departed, but this definitely is no slouch performance from him. He always brings it, and I think that's proven by this movie. Not really the role you'd usually see him in as like kind of the villain character, but I did still respect his performance. I'm just not putting it on the Mount Rushmore. That's all I'm trying to say. It was still a very good performance. I thought the story was pretty captivating as well. I think they did a great job exploring what it would be like for a black man to be free in the middle of the 1800s, obviously around the time of slavery. That was a huge no-no, and we see what happens to Django during the movie while this stuff is really ongoing, like the sign of the times and just how different life was back then. I think something that may be slept on this movie is the background shots. Some of the background shots were fantastic. I thought the scenics in the winter scenes stuck out, especially just beautiful cinematography. I did appreciate the background setting, so I wanted to shout that out. Not sure if that's one of the things that people speak highly of when they speak of this movie, but I did really like that part of it. I also really did enjoy the soundtrack to the movie as well. I thought the music, usually on this like type of movie and the type of songs they were using, that would feel kind of unnecessary and added like a little bit of a distraction to the movie. But I thought this soundtrack was really well planned out, and every time there was a song playing, I wasn't mad at it. It actually kind of amped up the intrigue and added hype to the plot and made me more excited to watch and edge of my seat ready to see what happens. So I did really want to shout out the music as well. I thought it was beautiful and just well done in this movie. The action, although ridiculous at points, was pretty spot on and explainable as well. I've been a critic of some westerns and some action films of being a little too over the top. I think that fits into this category as well, but at the end of the day, that's my favorite style of movie. I'm not going to, dock too many points from that. I think this was mostly explainable. I mean, Django's just a killer, dude. Like he's a good shot, so I'm not really going to gripe with the, realistics of the plot and just enjoy this movie. So I did think that was okay. I also thought the evolution of the story was solid. You have Django starting as a slave and then slowly becoming a deadly bounty hunter with Christoph Waltz's character guiding him and teaching him the ways as well. So I did like how the story did kind of develop throughout the movie. All of the scenes felt pretty meaningful, and there wasn't anything that was added in just to extend the runtime or something like that. So this felt like a very impactful 2 hours and 35 minutes, not like, oh, we have to get to 2.5 hours, so we're just going to throw a couple scenes in there to get there. Like this felt like a story that came together well. Everything worked out in the end. So I did think that there was no wasted time in this. I thought it was perfectly done, with the story and the runtime and everything like that. So I definitely am seeing the hype for Quentin Tarantino now. This being my fourth official movie of his, I know he's only making 10, so I've got a lot of catching up to do. The Hateful Eight is one of the top ones on my priority to watch next. Quentin Tarantino definitely becoming one of my favorite directors. So overall in this movie, I'm giving it a 9.2. 9.2 for Django Unchained. Really didn't even have a lot of negative things to say about it. You know, westerns. I've said it before on my 310 to Yuma video and Brokeback Mountain review also probably. I'm not a huge fan of westerns. Like when I think of westerns, I'm like, God, do I really want to watch that? But you know, this was an amazing movie. Definitely deserves a 9.2. So where does this 9.2 rank amongst the DubCast pantheon so far? So this is our number 2 movie so far, is Django Unchained, only behind Wind River. And this is also our 40th movie reviewed so far. So 40 movies in the DubCast. This is number 2. 2 huge milestones added to the Mount Rushmore, number 2 so far, and also our 40th movie review. So keep chugging along, stay along. We got more movie reviews coming. This beats out the other Western reviews so far. Like I just mentioned, I did give Brokeback Mountain an 8.2, which seems like I'm a little bit higher on that movie than other people, but I did really think that that was an emotional roller coaster. 310 to Yuma. You know, I thought that this movie was much more realistic. The story was much more compelling. Even, you know, you compare those two casts of actors, it's back and forth, but I think the performances in this movie, just how the movie was put together, was way more intriguing. And also you had the cinematography, the music. I thought that was way better in Django Unchained. So that's where I land on Django Unchained, beating out 310 to Yuma. So we also have some actor film comparisons we can do. So Samuel L. Jackson is in the movie Hard 8, which I actually gave a 4.7 and is the lowest movie on my list so far, in comparison to Django Unchained, which is now the second highest movie on the list so far. I thought that was a pretty funny dichotomy there of one movie's the second best, other movie's the worst. I mean, Hard 8 isn't really a Samuel L. Jackson movie. He's kind of the third part in that, but just thought that was a funny note to end us off on the score graphic. So now let's get into my thoughts and reactions throughout the film. So as I've become infamous for, not really, but I always just like to talk about the beginning of the movie. I actually really like this sequence of the Django music playing over the credits. I don't know, I guess more and more I'm being surprised that they have these kind of theme songs for the movies. I don't know, maybe I'm just like slowly becoming a film critic and observing things, but I did really like Django music playing at the beginning. Gets you ready for this movie, gets you hyped up. So obviously long credit scene, but that seems to be kind of a non-negotiable at some aspects of it. So I did like the Django music playing in the background. We don't really meet any of the characters beforehand, I don't think. At least I didn't write anything down, so I'm okay with that intro. Nice little Django music, gets you hyped up for this movie. So the first scene, or the first really impactful scene we have, is there's a dentist. He's got the dentist, what's that thing? Dentist, horseback. Why am I screwing it up? Carriage. That's when I go with carriage. So he's got the tooth on top of the carriage. Watching this movie, you know, brings you back to Red Dead Redemption, and I've said this before on 310 to Yuma review, but if you've ever played Red Dead Redemption or Red Dead Redemption 2, especially before watching this movie, it brings you right back to that world. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is in my Mount Rushmore video games. I keep saying Mount Rushmore in this video, but there's a lot of Mount Rushmore comparisons and things that I have to say about this movie. So anyways, it brings you back to those days, and you could definitely see like the dentist having the tooth above the carriage, like all good and well there. So he pulls up to these slave owners who are transporting slaves, either to be brought to an auction or just to another site. Obviously, it's a very hard journey for them. They have no clothes on. They have to wear masks sometimes, metal masks that we see throughout, which I didn't know was a thing. Obviously, they get whipped if they do anything wrong. I mean, it's all men. They're starving. They haven't eaten anything. So this dentist pulls up. He asks for Django, and they do have Django with them. So he goes up to Django personally, and he asks him about the brothers who used to own him. So being back in this time, there was a pretty common knowledge or way of finding who owned who. So I guess the dentist was able to track down the brothers and find Django on this journey. So finding Django, he asks him about the brothers, wants to buy Django off the current owners, but those brothers, different brothers, the new owners, the brothers, protest, and the dentist is not happy about this. These two brothers protesting the sale. So he just goes beast mode, kills them, taking Django forcibly. So right off the bat, we're thrown right into the action, and I'm down for it. Fuck slavery. I'll say that right now. I'm anti-slavery. I don't know who is pro-slavery in the year 2025, but I think this movie does a good job portraying that slaves are real people too, and they deserve to be free. Like, obviously, it's very fucked up on what people did to slaves back in the day, and I agree with the motions of the dentist, like, kill these fuckers. Actually, he doesn't even kill both of them. He kills one of them, and then the other one is kind of left alive, kind of on his dying breath. So the other slaves in the line are like, what the hell is happening? Because now this dentist just came and took Django. Now they're out in the cold by themselves, chains on and everything. And the dentist is like, I know, he doesn't say this, but he's like, I know they're going to not hurt me or anything, so I'll let them go, and then they can go do whatever they will with the guy who is dying. So he leaves them something to beat the guy with, and Django and him are on their way, and it's presumed that those slaves did beat the shit out of that guy, deservedly so, fuck that guy, and he is dead. So Django now with the dentist. So we learn a little bit about the dentist, kinda, not really. They're just on their way to their first town. So Django actually has his own horse. I believe they took a horse from the brothers that they just killed, and everyone in this town is taken aback by Django being on a horse. Yeah, I don't think you would ever see this in the time like that. So I mean, it's very realistic. I've said that before, but I think this movie does do a good job setting the time, setting part of it as well, not just the scenery. I think they did a good job being realistic. So everyone's like, what is this slave doing on a horse? Because literally at this time, every black person was a slave, mostly, especially I think they're in the western South, somewhere around there. So everyone's taken aback by him on the horse. They enter the town. They go for a beer. They are refused service because of Django's status as a black man / slave. And then the dentist takes that into his own hands, and his name is Schultz. I don't know if we know that yet, but I'm just going to start saying Schultz. So we have the scene of Schultz drinking beer with Django. I don't know if Django's ever had beer, but this is like a crazy turnaround for Django, who was just being a slave his whole life, and now he's like living this lavish lifestyle, getting drinks, riding on a horseback. This is all very new to him. So I forgot the context of the conversation, but this is when Schultz drops the iconic "It's like a reward" line. Had no idea it was from this movie. I wonder what Tarantino's thoughts are on this being like a clip that people use for to go viral when he's talking. He's like, "It's like a reward." Schultz had no idea that it came from this movie. So we have the bar owner ran out of the bar once Schultz tried to have him and Django served. He went to go get the sheriff. The sheriff gets the lawmen or FBI sort of thing, like kind of the bigger power. So they have the whole bar surrounded. Schultz walks out with Django, and they have their hands up, and then the sheriff's right there. Schultz shoots the sheriff, and right off the bat, I mean, if you're not already enamored with Schultz, like, he's a beast. I was like, wow, I'm ready for Schultz. I had no idea that Schultz, obviously, knowing a little bit about the movie, I knew the premise of it, but I just thought it was mostly like a Jamie Foxx movie. But Schultz, Christopher Waltz, can't say enough about him. He's a beast in this movie. So he shoots the sheriff, and it turns out the sheriff actually had a bounty and wasn't who he actually said he was, so he was faking his papers. They're able to get away with it because there's nothing to get away with. The guy was a criminal. He was wanted for a bounty. So Schultz, being a bounty hunter, brings him in for that proper price. And yeah, I mean, another great, like, two scenes right off the bat where Schultz is just being a beast. First, he kills the brothers, frees the slaves. Second, brings in the bounty after it looked like death was imminent, the whole town surrounding them. So good job to Schultz right off the bat. I'm rooting for him. Obviously, Django as well. So once they kind of settle in a bit, Schultz allows Django to get whatever wardrobe he wants to get. Obviously, being a slave, you don't really have selective wardrobe. It's just kind of the rags that they give you, and that's it. So Django has a very interesting taste. He goes for the blue suit, which I thought that was really funny. Him just showing up in a blue suit, riding the horseback around. So the brothers that they're looking for, they do track him down to this one plantation. They ask to look around. Django asks one of the slaves that work there, do you know these brothers? So they find him. Django shoots one of them. He whips the other one, so both of them are kind of hanging out around this tree. So shooting one, and then he gets the whip, hits him back. Revenge is served because I'm assuming those are the guys who lashed Django. I believe that is shown in a flashback. So when the other one comes, he shoots him at point blank range. All three brothers are dead. Actually, Schultz does snipe one of them. So after that bounty is collected, it's not. This isn't easy sledding. Like, the plantation owner was very upset that they went there and did that. But a bounty is the law at this point. It's like mid 1800s. So you ain't gonna do nothing but to stop a bounty, because that's how they bring in most criminals. So having those three brothers on a bounty, and Django's actions at the plantation lead Schultz to actually start to believe in Django and teach him more about shooting a gun, becoming a bounty hunter for himself. They could be a really good team together. Before that, though, they are pursued by the KKK, and now this is because of the interaction at the plantation. The owner there is like a secret member of the KKK. There's some funny stuff in there with the KKK and the hoods, and like they've got the wrong hoods and the eye holes don't fit. Basically poking fun at the KKK. Fuck the KKK. And also they're about to get destroyed because Schultz sets up the wagon to make it look like they're sleeping under the wagon or sleeping next to the wagon. So they all rush in with their hoods on. They can't really see what's happening. Some of them don't wear the hoods because the eye holes are too whatever. So they're all circling around the wagon, and turns out in that little tooth, there was a bomb. So Schultz just snipes the bomb, and it all blows up TNT, and Django is given the last shot to snipe Big Daddy. That is the name of the plantation owner. Obviously, as you can tell through some of the stuff I'm just saying already, this movie doesn't take itself so seriously, but I think that adds in another layer of just greatness to this movie. I think that's kind of a Tarantino staple, is not taking itself so seriously, but I don't think it's like a true romance where everything just seems like a joke. Like, this is some mostly real stuff happening, so I will appreciate that. So, as I mentioned before, they're going to team up. It's the winter season, so they're teaming up for the winter. And then Schultz will help him find Bermilda in the spring. So Bermilda is his wife, who is also a slave. They were split apart because a lot of families were split apart during slavery. So he has not seen Bermilda in a while. He doesn't know where she is. That's kind of his main mission throughout the movie, is to find his wife and get back with her. Luckily, there is that public sale, though, that I mentioned before, and kind of a public forum where they can figure out where Bermilda is. So we are introduced to Calvin Candy. So this is the slave owner who owns Bermilda through the legal documents, and he's one of the top slave owners in the area. I believe top 5, they said. He's played by the one and only Leonardo DiCaprio. So he's into mandingo fighting, which is fighting between slaves to the death. That's our first intro scene to him. That's the whole plot that they're going with to meet Candy, is Schultz and Django being experts, mostly Django being an expert in mandingo fighting. So right off the bat, we're introduced to Leonardo DiCaprio as this basically scum slave owner who makes people fight each other to the death. I didn't know mandingo fighting was even a thing. So I guess that was an interesting layer or twist that this movie took for me. I didn't have any idea that was a thing. So seeing Calvin Candy, aka Leonardo DiCaprio's intro here, was weird. And as I mentioned in my overarching review, I didn't think that this was really like a role that I would expect Leonardo DiCaprio to do in, but I think he just showed his acting chops by doing the good job he did do in this role. Anyways, so we see the mandingo fighting. Calvin Candy's man wins, and he is the one who does own Bermilda. they do figure it out because Brumilda is able to speak German. I think it is German. So basically, through deduction, they're able to figure out that he is the one who owns Brumilda. So while all this is happening, I did note that the music does go hard in this movie. Rick Ross, like putting Rick Ross in a western, that's just Tarantino. That's just mastery. Like, I love it. So we learned that Candy has a slave who tried to run away from fighting. This is kind of just the de-evolution of Candy's character. As we learn, he just like these small little interactions of how kind of a scum, how much of a scum he is. But also there is parts of it where he's not like the worst person in the world. Like he is more fair than I think like the worst person in the world. I think so. It's an interesting back and forth there. So this one slave he has tries to run away from fighting. Schultz and Django think about purchasing, but they don't do it. Ultimately, Candy does sick the dogs in him to kill him, which is brutal. I mean, those dogs, I don't know. I never really understand how people just mastered like dogs to kill people, and I'm not gonna be like make a hissy fit of this here, but man, to have 3 or 4 dogs just coming at you trying to take your life away, like you have no shot, bro. And it was just a sad scene to watch because this is like, okay, Candy's has no respect for black people or slaves. But I think he does kind of respect Django throughout the movie, which I thought was interesting. Like him and Django's dynamics very, I don't know, it's hard to label. It's hard to put a word on it. Anyways, so that's kind of one of our first clues into the, yeah, Candy might not be the best guy to deal with, and he may be upset when he learns about Django's true identity and what has really been transpiring in the next couple of scenes. Anyways, so we meet Steven. He's a longtime slave of Candy, and he is kind of the one who runs the whole slave operation. Granted, Candy has so many at his plantation and working different jobs that he doesn't really have the time to oversee it. Steven mentions being there for his father's time, and I don't think his grandfather, but just his father. So he is introduced and he's upset about Django being on a horse and being free. Now, this is a big dynamic that plays out over the second half of the movie. I think this is a good kind of positioning where you have the slave who has it all but is still a slave in Steven, and then the slave who has it all but is free, like Django. And Steven, I think Steven's an interesting, I don't want to say case study, but it's like he doesn't mind. I don't think he minds being. I think he likes being a slave. Like that's the weird part of it, because eventually, like we'll talk about it with Brumilda, but he's kind of like not really having her best interest in heart. Doesn't really seem like he's easy to the other like slaves, and then he kind of like almost assumes he's above them, and kind of since he's been there for a while, that experience, like the loyalty has maybe paid off. We'll talk more about Steven, but I thought that was an interesting layer to add to the story. So I did appreciate Samuel L. Jackson's performance there as well. I don't think I mentioned that in the overarching review, but he does a good job in this movie too. So we learn that Django's wife actually ran off the night before. Obviously, if you try to escape a slave plantation and are caught as a slave, it's not good for you. But I've never heard of this one before, so she's put in the hot box. So this is a little, almost like a dweller, where you have an underground kind of pool, and it's just a hot, the sun's laying on you, you're shackled there naked. So poor Brumilda has been in this thing all day. She's heating up. But Schultz mentions he's interested in someone who can speak German, because that's the way they know that they'll find Brumilda. And so Candy will get Brumilda out of the hot box for Schultz, well, what he thinks is Schultz. So finally, the moment we've been waiting for, Brumilda is talking to Schultz, and it's kind of like back and forth. Like Brumilda isn't really into it because she knows she's probably about to be used for sex, and being a sex slave is even worse than being just a regular slave. I mean, depending on what you're doing, but I can't imagine sex slave is one of the more coveted positions, and especially like this random old guy, you just have to meet him and then bang him. Awful. And she was probably raped a million times already, so I feel bad for Brumilda, but luckily for her, she is reunited with Django because he is hiding behind one of the doors, making sure everything's all good. And as soon as she sees him, she passes out. So they're reunited. I think it's still under the cover of Schultz and her being together. So that's really good because they can't let the owners of the plantation know. They can't let Candy or Steven know that this is happening, because if they found out, they wouldn't be very happy about it. So Candy's sister is also another somewhat relevant character in the story. Um, she's kind of just like happy-go-lucky, like, but still kind of scum because she owns slaves and like is kind of mean to the slaves. So she makes an observation that Bermilda likes Django, and then Steven is pursuing the idea that she does know him from before. So obviously, things are kind of coming to a head. Like it's been chill for a while. They're just hanging out. Django and Candy are on decent terms. Like even though Candy's a massive plantation owner and Django's a freed slave, like he's not gonna like refuse business to him. I think they actually talk business for a while. Like it seems like Candy takes Django's recommendation seriously on the Mandingo fighting for a while, but Candy's sister being clued onto this somehow really starts to open up a can of worms here. And Steven obviously getting a little jealous about this, gets pissed off and is starting to pursue this heavily. So once the first kind of initial wave of questioning is over, and he questions Bermilda to his satisfaction, and he still thinks something's up, but he's not really sure about it. He needs to reinvestigate, so he's going to reinvestigate again in the connection between Django and Bermilda. And he tells Candy, after he has an astute observation, I think he's just doing like general observations, and then eventually tells Candy, and Candy believes him wholeheartedly. Obviously, Steven's been loyal to his family for a long time, so this pisses Candy all the way off. He believes him wholeheartedly, and yeah, so this is where the climax of the movie happens. I mean, like triple climax of the movie, because there's like just bang, it's just crazy action after this. So Candy, after finding finding out about the connection between Bermilda and Django, and not only that they know each other and are connected in some capacity, that Django has been faking all of this stuff just to get back to Bermilda. He goes on a huge rant about how black people are submissive and they have this part in their brain that makes them always want to be submissive no matter what. It's a dimple. He says he thinks Django would have the same three dimples, and then he takes their guns. I think he says they say a lot of lies, or he himself just says a lot of lies. But this is like game over for Django and Schultz. Like I don't know how you get out of this. They don't have their guns. They don't have the element of surprise. I mean, it didn't seem easy, but it felt like they could have been able to get away with Bermilda in some capacity that wasn't going to result in them being dead. But now it's like, how do we get out of this? And I was thinking in my head, like, I mean, I just inherently assume all movies end in a decent capacity and like end good for the main characters, but maybe not this one. I don't know. I just didn't know what was going to happen. So what ends up happening is a deal is broken down. So they had a deal in place for a Mandingo fighter for $12,000. Obviously, Schultz and Django at this point have a decent amount of money. I mean, there's a compilation / montage of them heisting a bunch of bounties earlier in the movie. I don't think I touched on that. That was a cool scene as well. But they got money. So instead of buying the Mandingo fighter for $12,000, they are actually going to buy Bermilda now for $12,000. Way above what her price usually would be on the market, I believe. I mean, I'm no expert in slave trading. I don't even know how much you would sell her for, or whatever. But that's what they switched the deal to. It's a very heated negotiation. Obviously, Candy is very upset with being deceived and lied to and not knowing really what was happening behind the scenes. So while after that everything seems good, the negotiation has gone down, Candy just wants one more thing before the deal is done. He wants a handshake. And Schultz, I think it's very well illustrated throughout the movie that Schultz is not a fan of the same ethics and beliefs that Candy is. So instead of giving him the handshake, he pulls out his little secret gun, which we saw him before, shoots him right in the chest, and then immediately Schultz gets blasted by a shotgun. I mean, this is when the action just starts to go crazy. So Candy is down, shot in the chest. Schultz is blasted with a shotgun. Django grabs a gun and shoots the lawyer, and the guy who had the shotgun, along with a lot of the goons there. Just a ridiculous scene here where he just kills like 25 people. Just an amazing Django bounty hunter go off scene. Can't say enough. Like he's ducking behind cover, using dead bodies as a shield, just precision shots. Like I was for it. Like let's go Django, obviously. Um, so essentially, it's Candyland. So there's just a million people coming in, reinforcements. Steven tells him to stop shooting as they have a gun to Brumilda's head, or tells Django to stop shooting because they have a gun to Brumilda's head. Obviously, Brumilda is the key to Django's heart, so he gives up on the shootouts. And they capture Django alive. I'm really surprised. I think that of all the ridiculous action that happens, I'm really surprised that Django isn't just shot on the spot right there. But there is the method of torturing them over days. I mean, it's the classic debate of imprisonment or death. Like, I mean, we can go on about this for days. So they want to kind of imprison him, torture him, then they're going to ship him off somewhere else. He's going to have to live a terrible life. So we next meet up with Django. I believe he's passed out. He wakes up, still alive. He's being held upside down, naked, with one of those nasty masks on, about to get his nuts cut off with a hot knife. Just the worst thing you could possibly imagine. And those masks hanging upside down naked, like, ugh. I thought this can't be done for Django, man. So Steven comes in. It was one of the other people who worked at the farm there originally. Steven comes in and stops him. He didn't want this ending. They're now going to send him to the mining company where there is not operating room to do anything. You can't talk, you can't breathe wrong, etc. This is where Steven really rubs it in on Django, with the sort of superiority complex, like, oh, I'm better than you, I can control your behavior, and like whatever you do, you'll be watched, and blah blah blah. I'm better than you. Fuck Steven. He'll get what's coming to him, but Django is shipped off in with other people in a wagon. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Wagon, carriage, same thing. Anyways, Tarantino, as he always does in his movies, enters now into this scene. He's being handled and shipped off to the mining company. So Django actually makes a deal for the handlers, which includes Tarantino, to go back and get the bounty, with the bounty being on somebody there. They just have the money from the bounty. So they give Django a gun, and what? Yeah, I mean, I've defended a lot, and I said it before, I'm not gonna nitpick. So they decide to give Django a gun. They're gonna need him if they're gonna take down this bounty. It is Candyland, so there's a lot of people there. But what does Django do with the gun? He just instantly kills all of them. So R.I.P. Tarantino's character. He was in the movie for like a couple minutes, but Django is back on the run now to go and free Brumilda, get the happiness he deserves. So Brumilda is locked in a room, and Django kills the people who are responsible for the dogs. Those are kind of the first people at the edge of the farm that we met when we were at the edge of the farm for the first time, with Candy, meeting Candy and his sort of principles, and the Mandingo fighter who wanted to run away. So Django handles them pretty easily, and he's able to free Brumilda, reunited once again. And before this happens, he kind of says his like half goodbyes because he's hoping to reunite with her again. So he kills the people, the henchmen, surprising them at the house. He kills the sister, and then he has a final showdown with Steven. He shoots him in the kneecaps, doesn't kill him, and then leaves him to burn in Candyland while he blows it to bits. And he's reunited with Brumilda. Brumilda's cheering at the entrance. So happily ever after for Django and Brumilda. A great story, not too action-packed. It was action-packed, but not so much in your face. Like, there was story development, there was great characters, there was amazing plot points. Like, this movie had it all. Good music, good scenery, just a top-tier film. Great film by Quentin Tarantino, Jamie Foxx, Christopher Waltz, Samuel L. Jackson, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kerry Washington. The whole gang, they killed it. So this is one of my favorite movies. Definitely top 20 for me for sure. Probably top 15. So maybe even top 10. Maybe one day I'll put my actual rankings for other movies that I think are in my top 10 that I just haven't reviewed yet so far. So that'll do it on Django Unchained. What do you guys think of this movie? Am I a little too high in it? Am I too low in it? Is this one of your top 5? Is this one of your top 3? I thought this was a very good movie. Yeah, man, couldn't get enough of it. Excited to watch Hateful Eight. I think that might even be better. I don't know what people are telling me, but I like Django Unchained. So that'll wrap up on this one. What to expect in the future. Only a couple weeks of NFL left, depending on when this movie review comes out. We might have one more stream for divisional / wild card. Then we'll be divisional / championship weekend. We'll be taking a little bit of break before the Super Bowl. Besides that, more content coming on the way. Movie reviews up next. We got To Live and Die in LA, and we got The Revenant. Those will be the next two movie reviews. TV shows will commence in a couple of short weeks. After the Super Bowl ends, I'm back on my TV grind. So expect Bear season 3, Mando season 3, Penguin, all the good TV shows. I will have some reactions and tier lists and everything to do with those. So always talking sports, always talking movies, always talking TVs, shows. So if you like what you see, please subscribe. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a dislike. I appreciate any interaction with the DubCast. So, as always, be easy.